Thank you. Thank you. I love you too. Thank you very much. I come from Lebanon. I was born and raised in Lebanon, which used to be the only majority Christian country in the Middle East. We were open-minded, we were fair, we were tolerant, we were multicultural. We prided ourselves in our multiculturalism. We had open border policy. We welcomed everyone to come to our country because we wanted to share with them the westernization which we had created in the heart of the Arabic world. Muslims used to send their children to study in our universities because we had built the best universities in the Arabic world. They graduated and worked in our economy because we had built the best economy in the Middle East, even though we did not have any oil. Beirut became Paris of the Middle East, the banking capital of the Middle East. In 1965, National Geographic magazine had on its front cover, Lebanon, Eden of the Middle East. Unfortunately, all this began to change as the years went by. See, we got our independence in the early 40s. But by the 60s and 70s, the Christians had become the minority, and the Muslims had become the majority in Lebanon. And as the Islamic population grew in the country became less and less tolerant because they started pushing for more rights that were not compatible with our Judeo-Christian value system that we had created. And that's when the problems started. The problem was contained until the influx of the Palestinians out of Jordan in 1970, when Lebanon brought them in because we already had refugee camps. Actually, at that time, Lebanon was the only country in the Middle East to accept the third wave of Palestinians into Lebanon. The majority of them were Muslims. They put their heads together with the Muslims in Lebanon and declared jihad on the Christians. What they wanted to do is create a base from which to fight Israel, kill the Jews, and throw them into the sea. Something they tried to do in Jordan. Yasser Arafat and the Palestinians tried to do in Jordan, but they failed because of the dictatorship of the king. Yet they were able to come to Lebanon, use our open-mindedness, our fairness, our tolerance, our multiculturalism, and our democracy to topple our democracy. My 9/11 happened to me in 1975, when radical Muslims blew up my home, bringing it down, burying me under the rubble wounded, as they shouted, Allahu Akbar. My only crime was that I was a Christian living in a Christian town. I ended up in a hospital for 2.5 months. And as I laid in a hospital bed, hooked up to IVs in both arms, I would ask my parents, why did they do this to us? Why did they attack us? And my father would tell me, because we are Christians, the Muslims consider us infidels and they want to kill us. So I knew since I was a 10-year-old child that I am wanted dead simply because I was born into the Christian faith and lived in a Christian town. This is something so foreign to Christians in America. Because in America, our idea of persecution is, oh, I took my Bible with me to work today and people looked at me funny. That's our idea of persecution. Where I come from, our idea of persecution is they want to walk into this church and start shooting at you and killing you. Just like what they're doing in Iraq right now, just like what they're doing in Egypt right now, just like what they're doing in Syria, just like what they did in Lebanon. Actually, what launched the all-out war in Lebanon was 4 Muslims walked into a church service on a Sunday morning just like this and started shooting at people. That's what started the Lebanese civil war. My daddy would tell me, oh, America is going to come save the Christians in Lebanon. America and the churches in America are going to hear what's happening to the Christians in Lebanon and they're going to come save us. And then they would say, Britain is going to come save the Christians in Lebanon. France is going to come save the Christians in Lebanon. When they hear what's happening, nobody came and nobody cared. And as we started hearing about the massacres happening in the rest of the country, you see the Palestinians and the Muslims put their heads together and formed Jaysh Lebanon al-Arabi, the Arabic Lebanese army. And they started massacring the Christians, taking over Christian cities and towns. They committed massacres that were seldom reported in the Western media because the majority of the Western media was located in West Beirut, the area that Yasser Arafat controlled. And nothing came out of there that Yasser Arafat did not approve of. They would surround Christian cities and towns and walk in and massacre the people. One of the biggest massacres in Lebanon was the city of Damour in the beginning of the war, a Christian city. They would walk into a bomb shelter. They would find a mother and a baby and a father hiding in a bomb shelter. They would take the baby, tie one leg of the baby to the mother and another one to the father, and pull the parents apart, splitting the child in half. They would walk to our churches, urinate and defecate on the altar, and then torch our churches. The last lady that worked for me, I hired her because she was mentally disturbed. I wanted to take care of her and her family. And the reason why she was mentally disturbed is because they walked into her bomb shelter. They tied her son, 16-year-old only son, on her lap, held a knife to her hand and made her slit her own son's throat, then raped her daughters in front of her. These are the stories that went unreported in the Western media. Nobody in the world cared to hear, and nobody in the world understood. And when the leftist Christians, when the Muslims would come to massacring them in these towns, and the leftists would tell them, you can't massacre us. We marched with you. We represented you in courts. We pushed for your rights. We are on your side. And the Muslims would look at them and say, you are nothing more than useful idiots. You are no different than the other Christians, infidels. But by the time these people woke up, it was too late. And some of them who fled to come and hide in our town because it was the only Christian enclave left in South Lebanon. It was too late. We knew what our fate was going to be because we were surrounded by the Islamic forces trying to slaughter us, because we were on the border with Israel. I come from a little town in southern Lebanon called Marjayoun, the Valley of Springs. If you have ever visited Metula in Israel on the northern border and stood on the border overlooking at Lebanon, my town is across the valley, across the border. We knew what our fate going to be because we heard of the massacres, and we knew our days were numbered. And we knew to our front were the Muslims and the Palestinians who are waiting to slaughter us so they can be at the border with Israel. But we knew that to our back was Israel, the Jews. And we knew that of the two enemies, because at that time Israel was considered the enemy of Lebanon. We had no diplomatic relations in the 70s. We knew as Christians, if we go to the Jews and beg for help, the Jews are not going to slaughter us because we had more shared values with them than we had with the Muslims. So few people from my town went to Israel and begged for help. They flagged down an Israeli patrol and said, listen, we barely have 48 hours to live. If you don't come help us, we're going to be dead. So you help us, we'll be your buffer zone. It works out for both of us. Israel started coming in the middle of the night and bringing in ammunition and bringing in support and bringing in food for the military and bringing bomb shelters to people. And Israel would take Lebanese Christians, anybody who can fight between the age of 15 and 40, and take them into Israel and train them how to fight. Because we learned very early on in the war that you can have all your professional degrees behind you on the wall, your medical degree, your accounting degree, your law degree, your whatever degree. None of that will do you any good when you are faced with an enemy bent on killing you in the name of Allah. So Israel started to help, and Israel would come in the middle of the night, and this is how we lived for 3 years while no one in the world cared. I remember I was 13 years old, and my parents said to me, if they come to slaughter us tonight, we will create a distraction. You just run towards Israel and you never look back. You are a child, you are a young child. We lived a long life. Thank God I did not make that decision that night, because that's the night when Israel came in physically into Lebanon and kicked out the Muslim forces and the Palestinians and set up checkpoints to save our lives around our town. And that's how we stayed alive. We went on to live in that bomb shelter like this for another 5 years until 1982, when Israel came in physically into Lebanon, entered Lebanon, all the way to Beirut. And the reason Israel entered Lebanon, invaded Lebanon all the way to Beirut, because Syria at that time, who had come to Lebanon as a peacekeeping force, started shelling Israel from Lebanon, using it as, calling it Lebanese resistance. We Lebanese had nothing to do with it. So Israel, working with the Christian Lebanese in Lebanon, both in South Lebanon and in the capital in Beirut, trying to help the Christians take back their democracy and kick out the radical element out of the country. And Israel was able to come all the way into Beirut, kick out the majority of the Palestinians, including Yasser Arafat, where they kicked him out to Tunisia with his cronies. We came out of the bomb shelter and back to rebuilding our lives. As a matter of fact, in my first book, Because They Hate, titled Because They Hate, I go over pages upon pages. I list pages of all the years and all the attacks against the United States and Western interest that no one paid attention to. And I started realizing that what I used to think was a regional problem between a majority Muslim Middle East trying to kill or expel the minority Christians and Jews had become a worldwide problem. But the world was not paying attention. The world was not connecting the dots. The world lacked imagination. And isn't this exactly what the 9/11 Commission report said after 9/11? We lacked imagination. It's not that we did not know that Osama bin Laden wants to attack us. Osama bin Laden attacked in the previous 8 years, Osama bin Laden attacked the World Trade Center. In 1993, the only difference between the two attacks between 1993 and 2001 were the buildings did not come down. They attacked our embassies in the Kubar Towers in Saudi Arabia. They attacked our embassies in Africa and Tanzania. They blew up the USS Cole. And then they were so confident that we were so asleep that they came back and attacked the World Trade Center, the exact same spot again, and this time brought the buildings down. We lacked imagination. It's not that we did not know what our enemy wanted to do to us. We are dealing with an enemy for the first time in history that is so open, so clear, so determined. They don't beat around the bush. They're very direct. And the more direct they are, the deeper we dig our head into the sand thinking, na 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 boo boo, I'm not going to listen. And the sad reality is that as long as Jewish blood was being shed on the streets of Jerusalem and Christian blood was being shed on the streets of Beirut, nobody in the world gave a darn. It wasn't until September 11th in the United States that the world woke up and realized, why do they hate us? What did we do to the Islamic world? Very simple words I have for you. They hate us. They hate us because we are infidels. Plain and simple. So I am here to share with you today how you can get involved, how you can